join us here in a second. And we run a team that focuses on helping buyers and sellers navigate the residential real estate process in the borough of the Bronx. We have an amazing panel of professionals here with us today. Uh, we're going to start with Christina from Allstate. Um, we have Melora from Cross Country Mortgage. Bunch of different lawsuits that have been put together. It's not yet approved, so we don't know whether or not this is going to become real policy, but it seems very likely that it will. At the end of the day, all this is saying is that, as has always been the case, sellers and buyers alike negotiate with their agents the commission that they want to pay. Some services that do multiple listings in certain markets used to have minimums that you could pay, and now there are no more minimums that are required. There's still reasons why a seller would want to compensate a buyer's agent, and that's a topic for another conversation to get into more detail on. But there are a lot of changes happening right now, and a lot of misinformation out there. And I think that it alludes to one really important thing that everybody, I think, can agree on. And working with a knowledgeable professional is always the thing that's going to make sure that you're protected through a process like this. So, with that, I want to talk a little bit with Melora about where we are in the rate world, because that's always a question that everybody has when it comes to
buying and selling real estate. People want to know where rates are because if you're a seller, you're likely a buyer. And rates have been a big conversation piece for what's going on in this market. So, Melora, I'll hand it off to you. What's going on out there?
I'll tell you, Geoff, first of all, thank you. You said something that actually really touched me very deeply when you said, I trust these people. That is something that I've been in this industry for 24 years, and it's being trustworthy that's had me last this long. It's an industry where most people that are loan originators, they're lucky if they get past 5 years. I see a huge drop off up to 10 years, and after 10 years, it's practically non-existent. So the fact that I've been here doing this for 24 years and the fact that you trust me is such an honor. And I will do that, and I will keep that honor going for everyone that you refer my way. So thank you for that. So let's talk about rates, everybody. I'm here to dispel some myth, everyone. Let's focus on rates. If I was a genius, I would have bought Microsoft stock, a lot of it, in 1980. I wasn't that smart, and I didn't buy it. And now if I wanted, I have to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars. People have in their mind still 3%, 2.625. That was an anomaly because of a crisis, a 100-year crisis. Let's just look at rates and put things in perspective. Since we've been recording mortgage rates starting in 1973, the average rate was 8%. You've heard your grandparents and your parents talk about the heyday of 1981 when rates were 16 and 17%. Everyone has that war story, but guess what? Everybody bought real estate at a lot less cost, held on it, refinanced several times, and that property that they bought for $100,000 is now in some areas worth $2 million. So let's keep moving past rate. Then they fell. Let's jump forward to 1993. They're at 7 3/8. Then we have a little spike because of the housing crisis, down to almost 3.75. The lowest point for rates since they've been recorded, it was 2021, 30-year fixed rate mortgage. It was slightly under 3. Now listen to me. Did you hear me? We started at 8. We went to 16. We're hovering around 10. We're going down to 8. We're back down into the 7s. Guys, in 2023, everybody's panicked about rates. We're still below, well below the natural historic average, which is 8%, a little under 8%. We're at, on a 30-year mortgage right now, if the loan amount is $766,000 and under, we're below 7. We're at about around 6.75%, everyone. So since rates have been recorded since 1973, we're still below where rates have been. Let me tell you something. You've heard me say it. You're going to hear me say it. Fall in love with the house. Date the rate. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to hear Aaron and Geoff talk about this. You're going to hear Jay talking about it. You're going to hear Christina Shaw talking about it, because our phones have started ringing because rates have gotten below 7. Guess what that means? When people are calling me panicked to get pre-approved because they stumbled on the perfect house during the weekend, so is everyone else, because people have been sitting on the fence waiting for these rates to drop, waiting and waiting. And guess what's happened? Everyone else is running the same way. Warren Buffett says it. When people are running away from the fire, you run towards the fire. Run towards the fire, everybody. This is your opportunity to get a rate below 7%, below the natural historic average. And trust me, when it gets to be 5%, everybody's going to be running toward the fire. And you know what you're going to end up having to do? You're going to have to overpay for a house that you could have gotten 10% or 20% less when these rates were higher. Please remember, if you never remember anything I ever say in your lifetime except this, fall in with the house, date the rate, refinance opportunities were going to come, and they're going to come, and they're going to come. This is your time, everyone. It's a perfect cocktail of events. You've gotten a break. Rates are no longer 8% like they were at the end of last year. They're below 7% now on 30-year money. Values are still down, but I'm telling you, the 3 professionals on this call can tell you volume is picking up. If you want some special counseling on how to overcome your fear, Geoff and Aaron are going to give you my phone number, and I'm going to help kick you out the door with a pre-approval letter in hand to buy your dream home. And that's what I have to say about rates, Aaron and Geoff.
I love it. And I think it's important to kind of connect with that historical average versus today, because I know, at least for people our generation, we're feeling very stuck on, wait, rates were just 3%. I don't know if they're going to be 3% again for a long time, if ever. But what I do know is, if I could have bought real estate 10 years ago, I would have liked to have, because I would have made money. And on the long arc, real estate continues to appreciate. So like you're saying, I think everybody's going to jump in. Now, this is really tailored towards sellers tonight. And I know we're talking about buying when it comes to rates, because most sellers are buyers too. Usually
they do have to go
somewhere, generally speaking. And I think it's important that we also kind of talk to what a lot of sellers are feeling about, whether they're giving up a rate that's lower versus maybe they don't even have a mortgage. Maybe they own it completely at this point, and they're making this transition. And, you know, to those sellers who are considering making this move and becoming buyers and taking on a different kind of monthly expense, I think it just comes down to, you have to have your homework for your lifestyle. There are reasons people need to sell in every market, and there are reasons people need to buy in every market. And right now, depending on the property type, there are a lot of buyers out there. And it can be a very good time to get yourself on the market with buyers who are all coming out of the woodwork and get a good price for your home, and find yourself in something you want to be in.
Well, Aaron, you said something so important that I just want to, Geoff, that I want to highlight, is that because there is not a lot of inventory like you were just alluding to, because everybody could be sitting on these lower rates, these historic one-time rate. This is the most amazing time to sell, as it is the most amazing time to buy. The buyers are there, and you sell because there's no inventory. The prices are being driven up because of the fact that there's no inventory. Yeah. And I just think that the equity that they can pull out of their home right now to put on a down payment on a new home, they may not even feel the mortgage rates because they're going to have so much more equity because of this anomaly, because of the lack of inventory. It may not even be felt by sellers if they're trading in a 3% for a 6.5 or 6.25, depending on what mortgage product you have.
Absolutely. And right now it's important to find ways to be competitive. And so another reason to have a good team with you is to know how to be competitive, figuring out as a seller who maybe is also buying, how to navigate the sale and the purchase, the timing of both of those things, potentially the need for a bridge loan if you need to close on your purchase prior to being able to close on your sale. There's a lot of flexibility required in this kind of a market, and that's why having a knowledgeable team of experts behind you is so important. I want to shift forward into the selling process because I want to kind of try to cover that in a high view on what the process looks like. I always say that the most important part of the process is identifying your team. So hopefully if you're watching this, be it live right now or whenever this has been recorded and finding this on YouTube, maybe you think this could be your team. So nice to meet you. You want to find your agent. You want to figure out where you want to be and find an agent who's an expert in that market. And we know agents in a lot of markets. It's a big part of our job is finding experts who we trust. So if you need a recommendation, if you're not your expert, we can help you find an expert with a team as well. I find it really important when I'm working with clients that they be open to working with my team. They don't have to, but I'm always happier when they do, because it's very easy for me to pick up the phone and get any of these people that you see on this screen to jump into action if we have a problem. A lot of this business has a lot to do with relationships, and when you have a strong relationship, it can really make the difference. And that is beyond just the relationships on our team, but the relationships we have with other agents in our marketplace. That can be the deal maker sometimes because we know we work well together and can get the job done. Once you have your team, as a seller, you're going to want to start determining what you need to do to prepare for a listing. Some of that might be painting, some of it might be construction, some of it might be finishing floors, some of it might be trimming trees back. There's a lot of opportunities to ensure that you're going to have a smooth closing. Certain things that have become even more important is doing a pre-home inspection. Now, in the past, we used to have what was called the property disclosure waiver. And you didn't have to do a property disclosure in New York. The seller would simply pay a fee of $500.
That's gone.
That's gone. As of March 20th of this year, sellers in New York State are now required to do a property disclosure to the buyer at the time of contract. I have that right here. We always are happy to walk our clients through it. And it's going to ask a lot of questions. We want to do our best to answer those questions. Now, you can say that we don't have the answers, but we'd rather you be prepared, because before we sign a contract, a buyer is going to do an inspection. And they're going to find out these questions. And I'd rather have the knowledge on the front end than be surprised by radon and have a deal fall apart. Some of that, I think, leads really nicely into what Christina Shaw does and why I asked her to be here tonight. Because while most of what she works on is with our buyers, I think that it's important to talk about liability that a seller may have. Because if you can't get an insurance policy because there's a dangerous looking tree, well, Melora might not be able to close your loan without an insurance policy. So having both of these wonderful people's perspective as we work through this process is invaluable. Because before we're in contract, we want to be ready to take care of any potential issues. So, and am I hitting the nail on the head, Christina, when it comes to possible risks?
Love it.
You are, and good evening to all watching. I'm Christina Shaw. I'm an insurance agent. I love what I do. The market right now in New York specifically is what I would call a bit of a nightmare. From an insurance perspective, you have major companies that have pulled out of the market. I write with about a dozen home insurance companies. So there's still plenty of options, but a seller wants to understand that the incoming buyer's insurance company is going to do either a drive-by inspection, a drone inspection, potentially an interior inspection. They're looking for, just like you said, leaning trees. We don't want to see a tree over a home. They're looking for curled roofs. It doesn't have to be a brand new roof. It could even be an old roof, but it has to be in good condition. Um, and they're looking for cracked sidewalks. Think about a trip and fall. So we try to do some field underwriting over the phone. So if you're working with these amazing agents and they say, Christina, this is the original roof, I'm going to know what insurance company is going to be okay with that and what insurance company is not going to be okay with that. So going back to that team, also, it's important for sellers to make sure that the liability on their homeowner's insurance protects their net worth. You are having people come through your home potentially every day, a lot on the weekend. If somebody gets hurt, they are going to sue you. So you want to think about what is my worth, my net worth, and make sure your liability matches that number. If there was ever a critical point, now would be it.
That's great insight. And I think that it's important to also key into the liability you bring in by having people come into your home. And beyond just trip and fall, there are often people who don't have the luxury of moving out and staging in order to sell. So taking precautions like locking away your valuables and things of that nature, we obviously are with buyers, and that's a big thing for us. We don't do lock boxes when we sell. We're very big on in-person showings. You want us to sell your home, well, we're going to be at every single showing selling your home. And to that end, we try to keep our eyes on everybody. But there's only so much we can do, and we like to give buyers their space as well so they don't feel like they're being walked like a hawk. So I think that there's even more insurance opportunities there to ensure that you're not opening yourself up to risk and to loss.
And Geoff, to your point, sometimes like life just happens. Recently, I had somebody that was looking in an attic in a home, and there was a missing floorboard, and the woman did not see that, and it wasn't there like a week before. Like the floor was there, and then something happened. She fell through. She was not severely injured, but if she were to be hurt, that is a liability claim if I've ever, explained one. So making sure you as the seller is protected with the right liability.
Absolutely. And I think that that probably leads well into the next kind of conversation piece that I'd have, because some of that, inspections, property disclosures, that's all going to be very relevant if we're selling single family or multifamily homes. When we're talking about the co-op and condo market, there's a different kind of preparing to sell due diligence that's worth considering. And, Jay and I have had this opportunity recently where we've been dealing with deals that have had interesting challenges that could have been investigated a little more deeply, that would have resulted in a smoother transaction. And all of this to say, we look for these pitfalls ahead of time and do our best to avoid them. And when we find them, we do our best to navigate them. In this instance, for example, when we've dealt with co-op apartments that maybe didn't have legalization of combinations, or even a single or multifamily home that wasn't being used with the proper zoning, having an attorney who can do that due diligence prior to list, you might be certain that your home is a 3-family home, or you're certain that the co-op was legally combined. You bought it this way. But it's always worth it to have the attorney do a little bit more due diligence to ensure that we're not going to have a problem along the way. So, Jay, can you speak to that a little bit?
Of course. And thank you both for having me on the panel again. Very much appreciated. And I know why Christina is so happy tonight. You went to her before you went to me. She didn't have to wait till the end.
Try to switch it up a little bit, right?
I love it. So Geoff and Aaron, you're absolutely correct. In fact, I'm going to turn this and focus on the two of you, because I think what sets apart really great real estate agents like the two of you is the fact that you are aware of some of the legal pitfalls that may occur for your sellers, because you're experienced, you have experienced some of the bad things, and now you're well prepared going into that listing, what it is that you need to do research-wise. Obviously, I'm here in the background, clearly in the dark, helping these guys with whatever due diligence they need so that they can avoid certain things down the road. So for instance, if I may, there was a particular deal that we recently worked on. We thought it was a legal four-family. Turns out it's not a legal four-family. The job was not completed as far as the building department was concerned, but we went into contract believing that we were a four-family because we trusted our seller. But no, these things can be avoided by just doing a simple search and making sure that when you list it, you're listing it with the legal property quality that it is, and you can avoid certain problems down the road where you've disclosed one condition of the property when it's really something else. And so to either let your seller know ahead of time how to market their property is appropriate, or when you go out to list it and market it, you're telling the public what it actually is, even though it might look like something else.
Absolutely. And in that example, for the record, it was an off-market deal, which is why it didn't get investigated as deeply as we do when we list something. But sometimes when you're trying to move quickly to make off-market things happen, little things can slip through the crack. You take somebody's word to mean reality, and sometimes even if they thought it was true, and these things happen. And that's why an experienced team is important. So talking about the process again and getting into it, right? We're talking a lot about what you want to do before we get onto the market, because if we're going to find out that we have issues, we need to do inspections, we need to get building department things figured out. Those can delay our process significantly, and it's worth it to consider that before you consider listing, because it may be a timely and potentially costly process. Now, once we find that we're ready to go, well, then the fun starts, for us at least. One thing that I love about the way that we do our business is Aaron's focus is primarily on the marketing, and that's why he gets to work more with our sellers, and I work a little bit more with our buyers, because Aaron is going to be handling all of the graphic design, the social media, the video, anything that you're going to see that we produce as part of our marketing efforts is all being handled by him.
I get to have the real fun.
So after we've talked, we've prepared you for market, we've gotten whatever painting, construction, we've signed our listing agreement, and we're ready to go, Aaron jumps in, and you want to talk a little bit about scheduling photos and all that?
Yeah. So we have a team of photographers, virtual stagers, floor plan designers, including me, who we contract for the marketing of your listing. So right before we plan on listing, we schedule photos, which usually coincide with our videos and our floor plans. So we try to get everything done in one day, so we're not really inconveniencing our sellers too much. That process can take a day if we're really good at scheduling and everyone's on their game. Photos can take anywhere from 2 to 3 days to get back. And of course, we go through every photo, make sure all the blemishes are gone. We can do some magic with Photoshop, clean up some soap bottles in the bathroom, or fix a weird spot in the living room. Photoshop is really great these days, so it can help a lot. Oh,
sorry. That's much better though.
That does look better.
But you've muted both of them, so one of them has to be unmuted.
There we go.
There you go.
Yay!
Get rid of this.
There you go.
I think that when it comes to Photoshop and virtual staging in general, it's always about finding a balance between reality and making it look as good as possible.
Absolutely.
You know, if we stretch the truth too far, buyers come in and their expectations were higher than reality, they feel let down.
Yep.
If their expectations are met by reality, they can feel excited. And if reality surpasses their expectations, they can get very excited.
Absolutely. So it's really important to prepare before we come in with our photographers and videographers. So that includes decluttering, making sure that your home really looks as neat and tidy as possible, as if we were preparing for our first open house or our first showing. You want to present it in its best light. And these photos are going to be online. They're going to be syndicated to 1,000 different websites. A lot of people are going to see it. So you want to have your home looking as best as it can, because the photos are really what's going to bring people in.
Absolutely. It's kind of like if you were going to go sell your car, would you sell it as is, or would you go and take it to the shop and get the paint fixed where it was chipped, then take it and get it detailed, get a car wash, make it look pretty before you go and try and sell it? It's the same thing we want to do for your home. We want to give it its best chance to look as good as it can. We're never going to come in with an iPhone and take pictures of your apartment or home on our phone.
We will, but it's for a different purpose,
for us,
and not
for
for
the
listeners.
internet.
So being prepared before we come in is one of the most important things you can do, and really sets the tone for the rest of the process. With the photos, we use them for our show sheets that we give out to anyone who comes to see your apartment. We have them out for open houses. I send them to reporter contacts of mine to try to get press. We've been very lucky to have our listings featured in the New York Times, Berg Underground, 6 Square Feet, Cottages and Gardens, a lot of great publications that really get your property in front of a lot more people than just who's searching locally. With these big time national publications like the New York Times or the Week magazine, we've been able to get buyers from across the country to come see our listings. So it's been really great.
I think it's also important that we get your home to look like a home and not your home.
Mm-hmm.
And that can sometimes sound a little daunting, but we want buyers to come in and be able to visualize the space as their space. And if there are a ton of family photos, or if it feels particularly personal, it can be disconnecting on an emotional level for a lot of buyers. And that's why it's so important for us to ensure that your home feels clean and tidy and like someone's home, but not someone specific's. And it can go too far the other direction. I've seen many times people go too far in making it clean and tidy, and
it looks like a hospital.
It looks sanitary.
Yeah.
And there's no life in it.
Right.
And you can't connect to feeling like home in it because there's no life to it.
Yeah.
And so we're here to help you figure out that blend of making it feel like a home but not your home, and marketing it to make sure that it's seen by as many people as possible.
Yeah, and it's good to remember that you should take your emotion out of it. This is a business transaction, and it's important to remember that because it is your home, and it's going to have a lot of personal emotion attached to it, but it's also a business, and we have to remember that too. And we have to kind of take the emotion out of it and have our business caps on and think about marketing and what really looks the best, even though it might hurt to put away the photos of grandma and grandpa. It's the thing to do.
Taking down the wedding picture is just sometimes worth doing.
Yeah.
As far as the selling process, we generally do open houses on Sundays. Sunday is open house day. We are always happy to accommodate showings whenever somebody wants to see a property. We do our best to accommodate pretty much whenever we can.
But it's really based on our sellers, and especially when they're still living in the apartment or the house, we make it easy on you. We don't. We usually do 24 hours in advance or whatever you want, to be honest, in terms of communication.
We do our best to adapt our communication and our needs to our clients' desires. So if you're the kind of person who would rather go back and forth via email, then we'll do our best to stick to that. If you'd rather be a person who I pick up the phone, you got me on the phone anytime you want me. And when it comes to showings, we make sure that we're doing our best to give you as much notice as possible and getting as many people in. Because generally, the more people who come in, the better chance we have of getting offers. The more offers we have, the better chance of going over asking price. And nothing's better than having two offers at the same time.
Speaking of asking price, we should discuss how we go about pricing a property.
Yeah, that's a good question. So when it comes to pricing a property, there's a lot that goes into it. And there's a very big difference between the idea of market value versus an appraised value. So an appraiser may come in and they're going to look at comparables and past sales. And essentially, they're only going to look at past sales. They're going to look at price per square foot. They're going to look at the similarities to things that have sold within a certain mileage of your property. And that's about it. They don't get very deep. They don't think about the impact of the school district. They don't think about the impact of the market. They don't think about the impact of the interest rates.
They don't think about how the market changes from one side of Broadway to the other. Like it can get that granular in the city. So it's appraised value and market value from a real estate agent. They can be widely different numbers.
So what we're here to help with is determining market value. And the first thing is we do not decide what we list your home for. That's not up to us. It's not our home.
Nope.
We're here to give you information, give you our opinion, give you our advice, and it's up to you as the seller to make a decision. Now, if we're wildly off between what you think your home's value should be, what we think your home's value should be, we may tell you that we wish you a lot of luck with that. But if we're within the ballpark of what we think fair value is, we're always happy to help develop a strategy that makes it the best for you, the seller.
Yeah, but you should know that our pricing recommendations don't just come out of thin air. We're not magicians. Our pricing recommendations come from data, looking at past sales, looking at what's currently on the market, really getting down to the streets and the neighborhoods and seeing what the market is doing day by day, because you want to price your home for today's market, not last year's market.
And it's important because when you're looking at sale data, that data, especially here in New York, is usually 3 to 6 months behind, because it generally takes about 3 months for something to close here in New York. And that means that it was potentially on the market 3 months prior if it takes 90 days to get a contract, which is the average days on market. So we're going back 6 months to get to the listing date to talk about where they were when they were ready to sell.
Melora, what was interest rates like 6 months ago?
I can tell you right here. I have a little graph. 6 months ago, they were. So what? We're in. So that was like October of last year.
Yeah.
Something like that. So we were like in the eights.
Yeah.
Eights, low, higher sevens. I would say.
Right. So today we're like in the sixes.
So it's
And by the way, if it's a jumbo loan, so loans over 766, 550, the government sets that weird number in the sand. So that's not just a bank. You could get, believe it or not, ARMs in like 6.25 range, and then with rate discounts, if you can bring money over to a bank, you could get a 0.5 point to 7/8 off that rate. So there's a lot of clever things that we can do. If you don't mind, I'd just like to jump in on this appraisal conversation from a bank standpoint. So it's interesting that you're talking about market value versus appraised value. One distinction I'd like to bring up is that an appraiser works for the bank. They're high, you pay for it, as part of your closing costs, but their job is to let the bank know. They're independent contractors, and their job is to let the bank know that the lien that we're putting against that home is worth exactly what you're paying for the home. So again, you're right. If there's a neighborhood that is a transitional neighborhood, if you go on this side of the road, it's a different neighborhood versus this side of the road.
Right.
They do not, what you said is absolutely correct. They do not distinguish that because they're looking for comparable sales. And if the only most recent comparable sales on the other side of the road, that's what they're going to use to value your home. And that's why you need experts like Aaron and Geoff, because they know those distinctions and they know those neighborhoods, and they're going to give you advice. They can't tell you what to do. Hey, look, the appraised value could come in lower. Let's get Jay to protect you in the contract. So that's where team and strategy comes in. And that's really an important distinction about appraisals, because remember, they're there for the bank, not really for you to know. And they do get a copy of the contract when the appraiser goes out to the home. They do know the value that we're targeting. And but their job is just to be really honest based on comparable sales and based on what Aaron and Geoff are saying. And that's where the mastery and the artistry comes in with working with experts like Aaron and Geoff, because they know all of that. They take that into consideration when they're pricing your home to sell. They're looking at the data for what the bank's appraiser is going to look at, because we do not look at listings. Appraisers, I don't want to say we, appraisers do not look at listings. They will put listings in appraisals to show the trends of where the neighborhood is going, but they do not count at all. Unless it's a closed sale, it is not considered a comparable sale. So that's the wizardry and the mastery of having experts like Aaron and Geoff on your team, because especially when you're listing your home for sale, because they are going to take all of that into consideration and find that perfect number that's going to get you the best dollar for your home. And that if the person buying your home needs a mortgage, it's going to be the perfect number to where the value is going to come in from an independent contractor.
And, to that point, we go and make sure, as part of our job, if we feel like the appraised value and the contract value may not line up, if, for example, we had multiple bids that bid the price up beyond what normal comparables might say, well, there are a couple different routes. One route would be, make the buyer waive their contingency, which seems to be in vogue right now in this market. But sometimes you don't have that kind of leverage. Sometimes there isn't that much leverage. So what do? Well, we put a packet together for the appraiser. It shows how many offers we had. It shows what they came in at. Because if the market is saying loud and clear, this is the value, the appraiser will take that into consideration. And I've handed appraisers my own set of comparables justifying price with a handful of offers at the front end to justify the contract value. And it's helped. And it's gotten us through that process. I've also had properties that have not appraised, and we've had to deal with that and have a second appraisal and second loan application done. And again, there's always going to be a solution. And I think that it is interesting because it also kind of plays into the difference between what we do and the way that Jay looks at certain parts of the transaction. Because when you're talking to your attorney is going to talk to you about your liability and the letter of the law and what the contract says, right? When we're talking about contingencies and breaking contracts and things like that, Jay's going to talk to you about what your allowances via the contract are and what would be litigated in the court, which is good. Jay's a former litigator, so having somebody who knows what would happen in a courtroom is important. But I think sometimes the distinction that everybody involved in this generally wants it to get to a closing. So while we might have provisions in a contract that give an on or about deadline for a closing date, if we're not going to hit those targets, more than likely we're going to find a way to renegotiate and keep everybody relatively happy, as opposed to have everything fall apart over a missed date deadline.
It's also why it says on or about.
Right. Does that sound right to you, Jay? Is there a kind of both perspectives that sellers and buyers alike should take into account for that?
You guys have gotten so good at this. You don't need us. Proud of you, seriously. Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, as far as the contract's concerned, I like to tell my clients, your clients, they're really disaster documents. Once I've negotiated a contract and my clients have signed it, whether they're sellers or buyers, but we'll focus on sellers, they sign the contract second. They're signing after we've received a down payment, a deposit on the contract from the buyers and a partially executed contract from the buyers. You're not committed to that contract until you have countersigned it. So the seller is second to sign. And guess what happens to the contract after that? For the seller, at least. It goes into my file and it's never looked at again, except to make adjustments and credits if they were negotiated by Geoff and Aaron beforehand. Otherwise, if everyone behaves according to what they believe the proper behavior is, nobody looks at the contract ever again. It's only when I have a problem that everybody goes racing to the contract. What does the contract say? Read the rider. Where's the contingency? What did it say? So for sellers, I want to make sure that it's buttoned up in case there is a problem. But if you're working with Geoff and Aaron, chances are you're not going to find yourself in too many predicaments. The only thing that you can hope for, if you do allow for a buyer's contingency along the lines of financing or appraisal contingencies, is just making sure that that buyer is acting in good faith, working towards the same goal that everybody has, which is closing that transaction, not getting cold feet and doing something to jeopardize that transaction. And that's what my job is throughout the process, to protect the seller, to encourage the buyer to get things done in a timely fashion. They already know, without it being said, that I'm holding a lot of money in my escrow account. It's sitting there to keep everybody's feet to the flame, because if there's a default, that's the first thing that comes up. Well, I've got your client's money. Do you want to fight over it? Nobody wants to fight over it. Everybody wants an amicable and smooth transaction. And the more that you work with veterans like you have here on this panel, the less likely it's going to be that you find those problems.
So I think that leads really well back into the process and talking about how it kind of flows. Because like you said, it doesn't really become relevant, the contract, after it's signed, right? It's leading up to it, and leading up through this process, we've done our pre-market work to make sure that everything is the way we expect and want it to be. We've gotten you ready for the market. We did our photos, our floor plan, our video. We've been on the market. We're doing open houses over the weekend. The buyer likes the home, puts in an offer. Hopefully multiple buyers like the home and put in multiple offers. And potentially we're at a point where we've accepted an offer. We have a contract that's come together with terms and agreements that the agents have negotiated. Jay, as the seller's attorney, writes that contract and memorializes that for us, negotiates your needs as far as the contract's legal language goes, and then receives that escrow deposit, which is conventionally 10% of the purchase price. So when we're at that point in the process, the buyer will have usually done an inspection already before signing, and we did our pre-inspection, so there couldn't have possibly been any surprises that came up. So now that we did our pre-inspection, there can't be any issues. Every transaction is smooth. So at this point, what are you looking out for, Jay? What are you waiting on once we've got the signed contract and we're kind of waiting to move forward?
So generally speaking, the first obligation of a buyer under a contract of sale would be the 30 days that's often negotiated. It's actually pre-negotiated. It's part of the pre-printed contract. The only thing that ever gets negotiated is additional time, should that buyer feel like additional time is necessary. And I'll get into that in just a second. But there's a mortgage contingency. So buyer's working with Melora diligently and getting her everything that she needs, all of the documents, all the financials, whatever it is that Melora believes she needs in order to get that buyer approved for the amount of money that they're needing in order to close on that transaction, is all that I'm paying attention to. So I'm not a nuisance. I'm not going to be a harasser. At about the 3-week mark, I may call my counterpart who's representing the buyer, and I'll just check in. Hey, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, just wanted to check in on this transaction. How is your buyer doing with regard to the mortgage contingency? And usually the buyer's attorney is so busy with other files, they're like, oh, wow, Thanks for calling. Let me check in with Melora and find out how they're doing. So Melora gets a call from a buyer's attorney. Melora, how are things going? Well, we're doing everything we can in that big, thick Mississippi accent of hers. I tushy off over here, I can tell you that much. Doing everything she can. But at the end of that conversation, she may say, but you know what? A couple extra days may go a long way here. So now that buyer's attorney will call me and will ask, would it be okay? Would your client agree to extending that mortgage contingency for about 10 days, 15 days, whatever it is that Melora thinks she needs in order to get that person approved? 100% of the time, I don't think that there's ever been a case where I've said no. My client would rather go back to market, deal with all of that drudgery and dread, and find somebody else that's more qualified than you at a higher price. No, we're going to say 10 days is perfectly all right. Take your time. If you feel so positively that Melora is going to get you that loan, that mortgage, then we're going to give her every shot to do so. We trust in her process. We trust that you guys are diligently going about it in good faith. We don't want to go back to market and give you your deposit back. So now we say, here's an additional time. And that goes into writing. Now Melora surprises us. She got the loan done in 29 days. She didn't even need the extension. But she just did that to protect her own buyer because she's already thinking, what may I need, rather than waiting until she actually needs it. So she comes in right under the gun. She's a hero. Everyone applauds her effort. The contingency now goes away, right? That's been removed from the contract. And now the only thing that we're waiting on, depending on the kind of property you're buying, if you're buying a condo or a co-op, if you're buying a co-op, we're waiting for board approval. If you're a condo, we're waiting for the right of first refusal to be waived. And if you're buying a single family or multifamily home, we're now just waiting for the bank to go through all of its underwriting and all of those processes in order to make sure that the financing will be there at the closing table, which once Melora says, here's your commitment, it could be only like 2 or 3 weeks away, 4 weeks, again, depending on the type of property that you're buying. So now we're keeping in touch with the buyer for different reasons. When do you think your bank will be ready to close? When will you be cleared to close? That's the quote unquote terminology we hear. And then everybody works together jointly, the buyer's attorney, the seller's attorney, the bank attorney, if it's a co-op, the co-op management company or co-op's attorney, potentially someone that's representing a condo board, although less likely in that case, and the title company. So as long as all of this comes together, we can get that property transaction closed within a few weeks of that buyer receiving their commitment letter.
Jay, just out of curiosity, you brought up something really interesting that I think sellers may be curious about, and their buyers, is what exactly constitutes, what are the items that removes the contingency? Because usually from a bank standpoint, we do give it a commitment letter with a bunch of conditions on them while we're waiting on the appraisal to come back and property due diligence and title to come back, and people to have talked to Christina Shaw to get their insurance purchased. So what constitutes the contingency removal?
Well, Laura, you always have a way of asking wonderful questions. And that is a question that has yet to be answered, and I'll explain why. I have thankfully never been in a fight over a conditional commitment, thankfully. What Melora is describing to everybody that's listening is a commitment letter that looks like the bank is prepared to loan the money that's required to close. But within that letter, it says, but you still have to have a job. You can't screw up your credit. The appraisal needs to come back for X number of dollars. And now as a seller's attorney, I have to say to myself, is this really a commitment? Or is this a conditional commitment? And is there a difference? So again, Melora, thank you for the question. And thank you for allowing me to discuss this once and for all here in a public way. That conditions are generally met. And I have not yet been faced with a situation where a buyer has had to come to me after the commitment to say that they no longer qualify. What do we do? But I can tell you in a hypothetical situation, I've been close in certain situations for different reasons. there can be a negotiation of the deposit at that point. The seller's going to say, it's not my problem. You provided us with a commitment letter within the time frame that was allowed. I gave you that opportunity. That condition is released, that contingency in our contract. And just because your bank wasn't comfortable with you now as a borrower is not my problem. You've held me captive and hostage with this contract for now 2 months in a hot market where I hadn't been able to go out and market to someone else. So as a result, I've had to pay X, Y, or Z, or I'm out X, Y, or Z. Or what am I going to do now with regard to my next place where I'm planning on living? All sorts of things. Now we're negotiating again over how much of that deposit should go back. Should some of that deposit be carved out for my seller, and so on and so forth. And so that's what would happen, Melora, potentially, if one of your borrowers, God forbid, did not meet one of the conditions and wanted their deposit back.
Right.
Unless you know how to deal with that. I hope we don't have one of those come up. And
yeah, we rarely have one. I mean, this team doesn't have that come up because we've all been doing this long enough that we know how to get commitment letters very squeaky clean to where those issues don't come up. And that's the important thing.
Jay, you called it a disaster document. And I like that because that's exactly what that is, right? It's the unlikely situation that the buyer would flub something that should be a relatively easy thing, right? Is there a possibility that they'll lose their job the week before closing? Sure, anything's possible, but it's truly unlikely, or at least we would hope it would be. So we have this contract in place to protect you, the seller, from potential liabilities that may or may not come up, but they're really in regards to disasters. So
if I could just say one more thing about Melora just for a moment. Melora and I have been working together for many, many, many years now. We had a client in common who squeaky clean, great credit, made a nice living, wife made a nice living, plenty of money in the bank, so on and so forth. And I had told him, do not mess up your credit. Don't do anything that could mess up your credit. So what does he do 8 weeks later? He's shopping with his kid in Target or Kmart. And at the register, they said to him, hey, would you like some Kmart credit? Do you want to apply a credit card? You could save 15% on your purchase today. And it was like $150 worth of shopping. He goes, yeah, sure, why not? Melora all of a sudden gets these red flag alerts. Oh my God, the credit has gone down. What did this person do? But of course, Melora, as always, is able to wave her magic wand, make certain things disappear. She's always able to fix it. So I know I've shifted more towards Melora as the borrower's power tool, but it is important to have the right banker so that us as sellers in this discussion know full well that that buyer is going to be protected in the event that they make that mistake. So let's hope that mistake doesn't happen. But I just wanted to shine the light on Melora, who did save the day when my client screwed up his credit because he took out a Kmart credit card.
You're going to get a credit card. Get something better than a Kmart credit card.
Yeah, you're right. That doesn't even exist really.
You're going to put your whole transaction on this.
The key is you just have to know how to overcome obstacles, you know, and I think that comes with a professional team. So thank you, Jay, for highlighting that. And
I think Christina wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I want to jump into to piggyback off what Jay said with Melora and Jay. And it's not as major as what everybody just discussed, but what I find in the seat where I sit sometimes, if you don't have the right team, a lot of times ratios, right, your debt to income and how much you could qualify for may be tight. And the communication has to be clear to me, the insurance agent, and I'd like to do this ahead of time. There's nothing worse than doing this at the closing table, though it can happen. But somebody like Melora or Jay picking up the phone and saying, this is a really tight deal. I need the insurance to be in this range, and working as a team, maybe it's a higher deductible to get you closed, or maybe we won't add your jewelry rider on until a later date. But again, going to the communication and having access to a lot of insurance companies and knowing where to place the home that you're buying. So I think that's really important because a lot of times the homeowner's insurance is the last piece of paper before that clear to close. And we don't want an insurance policy being the stopgap to pausing the closing.
And I want to be clear for those of you who are watching who are thinking, well, the homeowner's insurance piece of this puzzle doesn't sound like it's really relevant for me as the seller. Very frequently, we find out that the last piece of the puzzle to set up the close is a need for insurance.
Yeah.
And very frequently, they don't have a good person. And having somebody who's knowledgeable and able to do it and do it quickly and do it well is just as valuable. And all of these people I use even when they're not on my side, right? I'm working on a deal right now where the seller who we're working with and representing had an attorney who she has worked with in the past. The buyer, a first-time home buyer, needed an attorney. And so I recommended Jay, and she's working with Jay. And it's made the transaction so much easier because I don't have a relationship with the attorney on our side, but I have a relationship with Jay, and communication can still flow, and it makes the whole process easier. So last question for you, Christina, and then we'll kind of wrap up. As a seller, is there anything they should be thinking about when it comes to closing out their insurance policy on their existing home as they transition into a new one?
I love that question. So I'm not a mind reader. If I was, I would have played Lotto last weekend, and I probably wouldn't be here this evening. No, I always say I'll come to work. It's Arthur.
Yeah, well, you've still been here.
I would totally come to work. Arthur would not come to work. But the seller should go ahead and notify their insurance agent. And if you learn nothing else from me after the closing, so if you call me tomorrow morning and say I'm closing at 3:00, please cancel my insurance, I will not cancel your insurance. I will say to you, please call me tomorrow morning. Let me know you closed. We'll backdate it to the day before, because for any reason that closing gets adjourned, I cannot have you, the seller, without insurance. Then I will ask you for your forwarding address. We will mail you the termination of your current policy and, of course, any refund. Hopefully, we're still the new insurance agent on the new property. And if you're going out of state, which many people are, we have relationships with agents in every state to make that transition. But make sure you notify your insurance company, because most likely your premium was paid for the year and you're due a refund.
I love it. Last question of the night, and I think it's the best one to end on. No, this is my last question of the night. That was my last question for Christina.
Oh, okay.
This one's to Jay. Here's the last question, because it's a big one that I think sellers care the most about. The closing happens. Where's their money? How do they get it? How quickly do they get it?
Interesting question. I thought we were going to go post-closing, but okay.
I want to talk about the money. Where's the money?
Where's my money?
So nowadays is referring to a post-pandemic world, whereas before things happened differently, and I'm not going to bore your audience with what happened before, and we only have a minute left. So what I will say to you is this. You can sit there at the closing. You can receive bank checks from the bank that's representing the borrower, and also get directly paid either via the attorney who sits across from me, the buyer's attorney who's had those funds wired to him or her, or a bank check that comes directly from the buyer. So it depends. It depends on where the money's coming from, and it depends on the origination of that money as to who's cutting what checks. Or nowadays, wires are happening quite frequently. So I can confirm to my seller that all parties have sent me the proper wire. I am holding that amount of money in my escrow account. It's safe. We can close. Title closer can go and file that deed. And I will then either cut a check to my client, or I'll wire that money directly into my client's account.
And that must make them very happy.
I hope so. And the buyer's happy too.
Everybody should be happy at that point, because when it's closed, everybody gets to move on and work on the next one. And the clients get to enjoy their new homes.
And I get to
amazing.
back to you guys.
Hey, that's my favorite part.
I'd like everyone to reintroduce themselves one more time before we jump off. So let's start with Christina and go around.
Hi, I'm Christina Shaw. I'm an insurance agent, and you could follow me on Instagram with I'm with Shaw.
Melora?
And I'm Melora Love, and I'm a senior loan originator at Cross Country Mortgage. We're a correspondent lender. We have all the products that all the banks have. We have our own array of products for self-employed people, and if none of those are good enough, we have 196 other products. So my motto is at Cross Country Mortgage, the answer is always yes.
I love that.
That's great.
I'm Jay Zimner. I'm the managing member of Zimner Law PC. I've been in practice 21 years. I've seen a thing or two in the real estate market. I'm hoping that by now I've seen every permutation of the kind of trouble we can see in a deal. I've also litigated a number of the provisions and a number of cases that allows me to kind of have a different level of insight into how these contracts are constructed and what to look out for and how to best protect my clients, not in an unfair way, but in a reasonable way to allow both parties to get to their objective in the safest, most possible way. So Zimner Law PC.
Awesome. No, I'm Aaron.
I'm Geoff.
And we are the Aaron and Geoff team at Compass, your Bronx residential real estate experts.
Thank you guys so much for joining, and if you made it this long, thank you so much for staying all the way to the end. And we really appreciate you guys joining, and thanks so much.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Bye.